Hello, everybody. It's Bruce Bishop here with another episode of Go Right Ahead, an occasional podcast that I have where I talk to other indie or self-published authors about their self-publishing process. And today with me is Pamela Callow, a friend and fellow author here in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada. And I'll tell you a little bit about Pamela first, and then we'll get into some questions to ask her about her journey. She's a Nova Scotian author, as I mentioned, who's been living here for many years, and was educated at King's College for her undergraduate degree, and Dalhousie University for her law degree. Both institutions, of course, are here in Halifax. She was admitted to the Nova Scotia Bar and practiced law, but after receiving a Master's of Public Administration degree, she worked at an international consulting firm and traveled a great deal. It was also around this time that Pam decided that she'd focus on an early passion of hers, which is fiction writing. So her first thriller novel in a five-part series, the Kate Lange series, is called Damaged, and it was published traditionally in 2010 and received immediate accolades and reviews. The second novel, Indefensible, was released in 2011. And then the third, also the Kate Lange main character, Tattooed, came out in 2012. And the fourth, Exploited, in 2016. So Pam's currently working on the fifth novel in the series, which is called Inflicted, and that'll be launched next year. So you've been kind of busy, Pam.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and welcome. Thank you for joining me today.
Oh, well, thank you for the invite, Bruce. It's always a pleasure.
Well, that's very nice of you to say. Um, when your first novel was traditionally published, self-publishing or indie publishing was almost in its infancy back in 2010. So I was wondering, at the time when your first book came out, did you follow the route that many other writers were taking at the time to get an agent and have that agent, in fact, market or shop around your manuscript to publishers?
Yes. So it was a bit of a circuitous route. So first of all, I sold Damage to my publisher in 2008. So that was actually even before Indie. Like Amazon had not opened up its platform. They're really the only opportunities for authors that I was aware of beyond traditional publishing was vanity publishing. And vanity publishing, for people who may not be familiar with the term, is really where you pay a publisher to publish your work. And, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, there's a lot of, I think, really good works and helpful works that people have written that have been fallen under the vanity publishing, you know, um, category, which is a bit of an unfortunate name, I think. But those were really the two opportunities that I was aware of. I actually had written a novel prior to writing, well, yeah, prior to writing Damaged. I'd written three different stories going on. Um, and I had won a bunch of contests with that book and got my agent with that book, actually. And that book had an editor in New York that wanted to purchase it. But at the very top echelon of the publishing house, they rejected the book. So, which is actually rather unusual, but it happened to me. And in fact, I'm working on that book again right now, in addition to Kate Lang. So when I wrote Damaged, I had that same agent. So but interestingly, that agent wasn't as experienced or familiar with the genre that I was currently writing in. So I ended up actually pitching my editor myself at a conference and basically selling the book. Um, so I wouldn't say that I had a really uh, traditional route to traditional publishing. But I had a publisher that really loved the story, and that just made a huge difference for me. So, did
You
that
were
answer your
hands-on
question?
from you were hands-on from the start,
Yeah,
literally.
Yeah, well, I had a lot of experience with my background in actually well, I worked with clients. So, I'm quite comfortable meeting with people in the publishing industry. I worked in New York. So it did it's I felt comfortable representing my work to a degree. But that being said, I wasn't an expert in the publishing industry, which is why I relied on having an agent. So
Right, right. Um, but when you, I think you've mentioned this before in a different interview, but when you really believe in your own work, then you're probably your best publicity agent, you. And yes, the traditional agent is going to be very helpful, but you've got to believe in your own work.
I think, yeah, I absolutely agree, Bruce. And I think the thing is, no one knows your work better than you do. No matter how good an agent, or I'm working with a TV producer who I adore, but and I've worked with other ones. So, and I've had previous ones who haven't always necessarily, um, everybody takes a different angle on the work, and I think as the creator of the work, especially if you have some business experience, I think that is helpful because you can kind of maybe put yourself in the shoes of the person who's listening to you and maybe get an understanding of what your work might offer them as an opportunity. So, which is kind of more of a business approach. On the creative approach, when I pitched my editor, it was actually kind of funny because I gave her a chapter by chapter. She asked me so many questions. I went through my book chapter by chapter. I was writing a different book. I was like, oh my, and this was a completely unexpected meeting. Like I wasn't there to pitch damage. So I was pitching actually something else to somebody else. And I was like, oh my goodness, like there's 72 chapters in that book. Fortunately, I remembered it. So,
There's various ways to get your point out there, I guess. I'm going to show a couple of pictures of your books, and so people can see what they look like. Um, Now, I had some trouble with another interview where my graphics weren't coming up. So, Pam, as long as you can see this, I think they
yeah,
might
I
be
can see them. Yeah, they look
oh,
great. Thank you.
okay. Good. So, damage, as you mentioned, was the first, then indefensible,
Mhm.
tattooed, and exploited. And the one that you're working on right now is called Inflicted,
That's right.
right? And you're hoping to have that out in 2026.
Yep. Yeah, I'm actively writing it right now. So that's the plan. I have a schedule. So I'm trying to keep to my word count and hopefully it'll all move along. I find the writing process, I don't know if you find this, Bruce, when you're writing, but for me, especially with a thriller, because there's so many elements you have to set up um, in terms of the crime and what's going on. It takes me a long time to do the first third of the book. There's a lot of setup that's involved. I really think, I have to work really hard to make sure that everything is connecting the way it needs to. And then
Right.
as I proceed along, things move along more quickly, fortunately. So,
Right. Well, luckily, this isn't your debut, so you've had
yeah,
all that experience with
yeah.
production and the creative side as well. Um, the praise of the Kate Lange series seems to have appeared almost automatically, and I think you were writing the second book when the first one came out. Is that right?
I had
Um,
actually finished it. It had actually gone to production,
ah,
which is a bit unnerving. Writing a book before your readers have read the first book, and you're like, I hope they liked this part of the first book because
right. And
you're carrying certain dynamics over into the next book.
for sure. And I'm making it sound so easy, but I know it wasn't easy, right?
Yeah, no. So basically, with my series, um, so here's the thing about my experience, and I can only speak to my experience, and in a time in publishing which is probably quite different now. Um, I ended up with meeting a really wonderful editor named Valerie Gray, and she loved my writing. And I mean, there's nothing better than having somebody who resonates so much with your work. Like
Mhm.
it's a great boon to a writer. And but it also, what I didn't realize, it was a great boon to my career because my editor championed my book within the publishing house. And I didn't even know this. Like, I had no idea. I was actually writing my second book, and I wrote it with a cracked rib because I fell on the oval. So, I was just trying to get my book done. I had no idea this was going on. And but she championed my book internally to the sales force. And because she did that, the book resonated with buyers in Canada and the US. My book ended up getting selected as a Levy Home Entertainment pick, which was actually the first time a debut author with my publisher had received that pick. And I didn't even know what it meant. Like, I mean, and no, but what it meant is that I had a really, really large print run.
Mhm.
And my books ended up being put in the top 10 bestsellers display in every store in North America. So every bookstore, every airport, Shoppers Drug Mart, I had a huge print run at Target. Um, and um, it was kind of like, I mean, I just didn't even really have a concept of of this world in that sense. So in terms of getting the praise around it, I mean, they did send my book out to a lot of places to get reviews, which helps generate it. Not everybody loved it. I mean, like I was just fortunate that the reviews were good, because you
Right.
don't know when they send your book out. I mean, every time I got a little alert that I had a review, I'd give my phone to my husband and say, "Can you just check this, please?"
Your heart skips a
Because
beat. Yeah.
it
Yeah.
does. I mean, it's unnerving. No matter whether you love what you've written, or your editor loves what you've written, or you have readers who love what you've written. Not everybody's going to love what you've written, and especially the wider your audience,
Mm.
the truer that is.
That's a
So,
good that's a good segue because I wondered what it was like for a
mm.
Canadian author to be published by a fairly big American publisher, getting your book, as you say, distributed to every drugstore and airport shop and whatever is pretty amazing. Um, did 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 they want you to change Canadianisms, or so to speak, or locations in your books?
Not at all. Actually, what was really refreshing about this? So, um, just so you know, like I have sort of the really classic experience of most authors of, a file folder stuffed with rejections. Like, we're not talking that, I wrote this book and I met my editor and it was lovely and I sold my book and then I had this big release. No, I mean, there were a lot of rejections. And I remember with Damaged, fortunately for me, I had the success, ultimately rejection of my last book, but I knew that I was writing at a level that I could get published. I was being seriously looked at to be published. So, and that helps you develop some confidence in what you're doing. At the same time, I had so many rejections from editors and agents over my first book and with Damaged in terms of editors. And I mean, but you start being able to parse the rejections. So the rejections for Damaged were, I loved the characters, I hated the plot. And literally the same day, I loved the plot and I hated the characters. And, that's just subjective. So in terms of the location, when I wrote Damaged, I'm trained in Canadian law, and Canadian law is based on the British system. It's not based on the American system. And I really wanted to write an authentic experience of a lawyer. And I thought, well, I can't really put her in a town. Like I'm familiar with a number of American cities, but I thought I don't feel I can write this genuinely. I'm not an American lawyer, and I didn't train in the States. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to do what Ian Rankin did, make location a character.
Mhm.
And I put Halifax in the very first line of my book. I was just like, we're putting it right on the page. Everybody can open my book and see that it's in Halifax.
Right.
And the line goes something like, springtime in Halifax is not known for its warmth or sunshine, nor was Lyons McGrath Barrett, which is the law firm that Kate works at.
Mhm.
And I never had, my publisher loved the setting. it never bothered them. And what was interesting, once I got this pick and I was everywhere in North America with my book, I never had people thought it was interesting. They
Mhm.
liked Halifax. You know, I actually just recently had someone reach out to me over X saying, I just came to Halifax and I read your book. And, you know, it was great to go to all these locations that you mentioned in your book. And, you know, it's so I'm really actually, that's probably one of my things that I am really proud of about my work is that I was able to feature a place that I love and have people see it. Now, some of it, like there's some scary scenes, but see it through, you know, like just bring people into Halifax in a different way. And so yeah, so it wasn't a problem. It hasn't been a problem as far as I know. I mean, maybe it is, and people don't tell me. I don't know.
Well, I'm
Seems
I'm
fine.
with you. I'm a firm believer in,
Yeah.
having locations that are close to
Uh,
you, near to you, locations you love. I've done that in all four of my books as well,
yeah.
because I just figure I love Canada. It's my home and native land and all that stuff. And so why not? And Pam, we're going to have another interview where you talk about your indie publishing that's been happening over the past couple of years and putting out a second edition of your four books, because my little timer here is going to start
Oh,
screaming at
sorry.
me. No, no, don't apologize. I think it's wonderful to hear your journey, and I want to hear more. So I'm going to stop the recording now.
Mhm.
Thank everybody for joining us today, and you stay where you are for a minute. And and again, folks, stay tuned for part two of an interview with Pam Callow. Bye bye, and you stay put.